Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Following the mass resignation of THA officials from the Progressive Democratic Patriots party, there have been a great deal of conversations going on. Now, financial analyst David Walker is not afraid to wade into it with us, and he joins us now to discuss the issues associated. Welcome, Mr. Walker. Now, there have been people who've been saying that, okay, well, yes, they're surprised. No is something that they were expecting. Past surprise or expectations, what do you think are the main reasons for this move that we're seeing?
I think the seeds of this have been sown for some time. Ever since the falling out between Watson Duke and not just Farley Augustine, but Farley Augustine and his team in the executive, I felt that this was inevitable, and I think a lot of people agreed with me. In particular, I paid some attention to the words of Watson Duke at the time. Um, in the midst of the fallout, Watson Duke made it clear that he regarded the PDP as his party, a party that he owned and that he will treat as he sees fit, as if it were a private sector enterprise. And given that mindset, up against a group of people who felt that it was a political party, regardless of who formed it, regardless of who financed it, that it belonged to its members. This sort of difficulty was inevitable, in my view. And if I might go a little further, if I were in the position of the chief secretary and his supporters, I would rather have this sooner than later. If it's going to happen at any time during your term in office, the time is now. So I am not very surprised.
But it's one thing to say, okay, well, yes, it's not just the chief sec, it's not just the chief sec and Dr. B. Israel, but to Bagay, Mr. Walker, everybody. And do you think it was intimidation? Do you think moral suasion? It says something when there's this kind of unanimous statement where it's every single body who was elected, who's a councillor, just saying, okay, well, no, I think we're leaving the PDP.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes. Those of us on the ground over here, always got the impression that there was cohesion between that group with Watson Duke and one or two of his supporters on the outside, even though, as he said, it's his party. So that when this happened, it's not a surprise to many of us that more than 90% of those elected, of those in the hierarchy of the party, went one way and left Watson Duke on his own effectively. Most people find it difficult to align themselves with the kind of behavior that happened with the New York episode. Going in with Watson Duke now would mean that you condone that sort of behavior, that somebody, because they regard the party as their own, feel that they could order the executive to do whatever they want with the public's money. And what I see is that most people reject that. They feel that there's a legitimate executive which makes decisions in a collaborative way, and that you simply could not have one person who felt and acted as being above the rest of the people in the party.
And it's interesting that we're just about 48 hours after, I think, 1 year of the election that saw this massive surging tide sweeping the PDP into the THA. And at that point in time, you would have had the current chief sec saying that he was not the chief sec of the people who would have voted for the PDP, but he was the chief secretary for Tobago. And the way that you speak about those on the ground who know, what kind of feedback are you getting from individuals in Tobago at this point in time, Mr. Walker?
The reaction is mixed. And you always have to be a little careful that in making a pronouncement on the way people are responding, that you're reflecting only the group that you mix with. So that even having said that, I am getting the feeling that most people are taking a wait and see approach. People have their views, some support it, some are against it. But I get the impression that people are just waiting, see how it goes, whether the governance improves or deteriorates, will really define, I suspect, how people view this in hindsight, particularly in 3 years' time when we come up to the next election. I think it will be all down. I think this will blow away, and it will be all down to how they have performed overall over the 4 year period, rather than just this one incident in particular.
And he said, we'll look and see how that takes place in 3 years' time. We have about 3 minutes on this side of the conversation. But political scientist Dr. Bishnu Raghunath, he's kind of quashed questions of whether or not the move away from the PDP but remaining in the THA is unconstitutional. But the chief sec himself has said that there will be no rush to the polls, but consultations with Tobagonians will take place. Possibly some of those individuals, he said, who are going to be taking that wait-and-see approach. What are your thoughts on having those consultations as opposed to saying, okay, well, we're going to get a fresh mandate? And what are some of those things that you want discussed in those conversations, in those consultations?
Well, I have seen consultations taking place, and I have to credit the PNM as well. They also have been doing their consultations. So consultations, I don't think will change significantly as a result of this action. It's happening already, and I think we have to give credit to both parties, well, the parties and now the independents for that. I know that there is a discussion today as well, so that they are addressing the issues directly with people, and I think that will serve them well going forward. I do also believe that it is one of the things that stood out for them in the run up to the election, in the sense that they were on the ground, they were talking to people, they did, may not have been formal consultation, but they now have a history of reaching out to the people over the long term, not just for 2 weeks before the election. So I don't think they will fail on that front. I expect the PNM to do their work as well. I think what will happen is people will judge based on what comes out of it. Judge on substance rather than just a lot of chat.
So let us take a pause in our chat. We'll take a short break. We're speaking with Mr. David Walker. We'll return with more. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're speaking with financial analyst, among other things, Mr. David Walker. We're looking at what is taking place in Tobago at this point in time with the movement of individuals resigning from the PDP party, still remaining in the THA, and the implications, impacts, and issues surrounding that. But PDP, Mr. Walker, where do you think this leaves the head Watson Duke? What you said leaves him alone, leaves him in the cold. What do you think is his position at this point in time? Where does he move? Where does he go from here?
The way I see it, and this is just a personal view, is that he has literally to start all over again. The party that he created and developed jointly, eventually with other persons, is not what it is today that it was a week ago. And having, if you like, suffered that large backward step, he has to build again. He has shown he has the ability to do it. I don't know whether he would have the people around him to support him in that endeavor. That is something that we will see with the passage of time. Also, he had set out his stall to move his personality, his image across the Trinidad, to do in Trinidad what he had achieved in Tobago. I think one of the biggest fallouts of this is that his ability to do that, I think, has been severely diminished. So he, I think, is going to face a decision as to whether he will continue with his Trinidad Trust as the main avenue for him, or whether he will spend the time necessary to fight Fali Augustine and his group, the independents, and also the PNM in Tobago. And let me just add one other thing that I think has been missed, if I may. It is that there's been discussion about the legal reality that there is no need for an immediate election. There is no need to call an election based on the legislation under which Tobago is run. There is, however, an issue that I am going to raise now, which I think will come to the fore, and it is this. Having removed 13 of his members and his supporters from the House of Assembly, you're left with Watson Duke and the PDP with one member and the PNM with one member. Who has the authority to be the leader of the opposition in that situation? Does Watson Duke have the ability now to challenge the PNM incumbent as the leader of the opposition? It's something that I would like to hear a legal opinion on. Logic tells me that they both have equal rights to the position. But as I say, it's not raised its head yet, but I think it's a most interesting thing. And I'm sure if there's any possibility of Watson Duke attaining that position, that he would go for it.
And one of the things I wanted to ask, and you just spoke about the move and the thrust in Trinidad, do you think that is part of the issue that caused this? I mean, yes, the individuals who said that the writing was on the wall looking at the incident overseas, New York, but there has been anecdotal commentary saying that we didn't see you when this was happening, but we see you in possibly other areas where they're flooding in Trinidad. And is that part, do you think that is part of the issue as well? One of the factors?
I don't feel so. I think most people in Tobago accepted that Watson Duke had made a decision. He was open about it, that he was going to push ahead to develop, if you like, his brand in Trinidad. And I think that was accepted. I don't think people begrudged him his decision or the opportunity to follow that route. Secure in the knowledge that the Tobago matters were being dealt with by those who remained here in Tobago. So I really don't believe that that will be much of a factor in the medium term.
I mean, looking at other things that you would have said, though, in terms of like your thoughts on Mr. Duke's statements in terms of saying Farley and friends, Ansel, Dennis and others talking about defectors, independents. I think even the word Nowarians was bandied about. Is this political gamesmanship? How might that sway public perception to them or the members who would have resigned?
Well, I had imagined that in the aftermath of the election and the way Farley, Augustine, Faith Israel, and the other leadership of the PDP conducted themselves, staying away from this kind of petty, stupid, condescending language. I had imagined that people would have learned that by now the public is not interested in that. The public does not want to hear that. The public wants to hear arguments. They want to hear the consultation, as you rightly described earlier, and they want intelligent, grown-up discussions, not throwing silly names at each other. So I don't see that as assisting. In fact, if they go down that route, I think that will turn people even further against them.
Do you see this group cohesively forming a party itself, as opposed to saying, okay, well, we've resigned, but we don't have necessarily a common banner, apart from saying that we're about the business of Tobago, Mr. Walker?
Again, I can't say what has gone through their minds, but I think it is virtually inconceivable that they would have made this move without first planning what their next step would be, party-wise. I don't imagine that it would be a good idea to rush to form a party, so I expect them to take a little time. But certainly, I would be amazed, shocked, even, with the notion that they've done this without first considering and perhaps agreeing on the formation of a party at some time in the future. So yes, I expect that they will do that.
And you said that you don't expect this move or this mass resignation to really stymie any efforts. Are there anything is there anything in the short term that you say may need to take a pause, or it may take a little longer than might have been expected at first blush? What are some of those things, the immediate things that may have to be recalibrated a little bit?
As a resident on the island, I actually hope that it's the opposite. I hope that this action that they've taken spurs them on in the understanding that they need to deliver to the population and that they really put steps in place to do that. They need to show that this has worked to the benefit of the average citizen, more so than a normal political party. So you have the coming together of a new political party, then a rupture in that political party. The only antidote to that, in the eyes of the public, is delivery. They must deliver, and that's what I expect coming forward. I know that they are a relatively new regime with very little political or even public sector management experience. They have to get above that. They have to ensure that they bring in the expertise where necessary and learn very, very fast. Because if they do not deliver, I would expect them to suffer. So they must deliver. That is the solution.
You said consultation has been happening. You see people consistently on the ground, Mr. Walker. Just before we close, what would the other side of the spectrum have looked like? So yes, there are these rifts that people can see or they cannot see within the party, but it takes a lot longer for that separation to take place. What might have been some of those things spilling over from it?
Well, I think the touch point was that New York trip. I think that brought quite a few people to the point where they say, no, this is enough. We can't go any further than this. We cannot accept that we will slide further down than where we are. You know, oftentimes we're talking here about relationships in a political scenario, but relationships in any scenario go through phases. And you can often see deterioration beginning to set in. And you either find ways to compromise, talk to each other, get over whatever perception each person has of the difficulties, or you accept that there is no future in this relationship and you call a halt to it. That clearly is what was decided in this case. They come to the conclusion they simply could not work together again. And, you know, relating back to the population, I think, saw it coming.
And in the final 30 seconds we have, Mr. Walker, do you see the opportunity for political players who have tried or vied for these sorts of positions of power in Tobago? Do you see openings or opportunities for them to make plays and be a little more successful now?
There are clearly opportunities arising out of this. Even within the PDP needs to reconstruct. Presumably, they will want to find people who will take over their positions and do the work that those who have left had done in the past. So there's a huge opportunity for people who believe in what the PDP stood for and hopefully still stands for. They just have to decide whether Watson Duke is the right person to take it forward. Equally, there comes opportunity for other parties who feel that the PDP has let down the population and present themselves as a viable alternative to both the PDP and the PNM. That is a taller hill to climb, but the opportunity is there.
Thank you so much for helping us to put that spotlight on Tobago, Mr. David Walker, financial analyst. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.